Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving headfirst into an ancient, highly dramatic tale of extreme trials, terrifying monsters, and the literal, lethal power of devotion. We're going to follow one specific character through an absolute psychological and physical gauntlet, and get this, it all happens in the span of just one truly terrible day.
Picture this for a second. You're a queen. You are entirely accustomed to the safety, the luxury, and the comfort of a kingdom. And then you wake up to a literal waking nightmare. You're completely alone, totally stripped of your status, sitting in a dark, unforgiving wilderness that is crawling with beasts of prey. The tension in this setup is just immediate and completely suffocating.
Now, just a quick heads up before we get too deep into the woods here. Damayanti's husband is a king, and throughout the source text, he's referred to interchangeably as Nala or Naishada. So just keep that in the back of your mind so we don't get completely lost trying to follow her story.
Okay, Section 1, Alone in the Wilderness.
Let's set the scene. Our story opens with Damayanti waking up refreshed in a lonely forest. But she looks around, and her lord, Naishada, has just completely vanished. The text simply says she sprang up, and you can honestly feel her heart racing right there, right? That sheer, gripping panic of isolation setting in as she scans the empty tree line, just trying to comprehend what on earth just happened.
But you know, that adrenaline rush, it doesn't last. Very quickly, she sinks down in a stupor. She is so utterly overwhelmed by the agonizing grief of this abandonment that her body literally just gives out on her. It hits her that she's entirely alone, totally helpless, and sitting right in the middle of a desolate place practically made for hungry beasts. Moving erratically now, like she's lost her mind, she shrinks in terror from the shadows, just weeping and wailing into the absolute void of the deep woods. We are literally witnessing the stages of a complete emotional breakdown here. From springing up in panic, to collapsing in a stupor, to crying out into the darkness. And when she finally speaks, what's really wild is that her main concern actually isn't her physical safety. Her words reveal this agonizing disbelief that her highly moral, upright husband would ever break his pledged word and just leave her there sleeping. It's that betrayal of trust that clearly cuts her so much deeper than her very real fear of the dark. So her vulnerable state is firmly established, but her crucible? It's honestly just getting started. She's abandoned in the woods, she's about to be attacked by a giant snake, and then assaulted by a rescuer. Let's look at how this nightmare rapidly accelerates.
Moving right along to Section 2, the giant serpent attacks.
Suddenly, the psychological dread turns into a very real flesh and blood threat. Completely blinded by her grief and wailing bitterly, the text says like a female osprey, she wanders completely unaware right into the path of a massive hungry snake. There's no long, suspenseful buildup here, just suddenly, boom, she is seized tight within its giant coils. But here is the craziest part. Even while staring death right in the face, her singular devotion completely shines through. She weeps not for herself, but for Naishadha, literally being squeezed to death by a giant reptile, and she is out loud worrying about who is going to soothe her husband when he gets weary and hungry. It is just an unfathomable level of selflessness. Which brings us to Section 3, Saved by the Huntsman. Just when you think it's absolutely all over, a lifeline drops in out of nowhere. A huntsman roaming the woods hears her loud lamentations, rushes the reptile, and chops off its head with a sharp weapon. He acts as the absolute perfect savior here. He sets the traumatized queen free, gently revives her by sprinkling water on her, and feeds and comforts her. For a brief fleeting moment, we finally get to breathe a sigh of relief.
But don't celebrate just yet. Section 4, a dark turn.
Because in these ancient epics, safety is usually a total illusion. The huntsman kindly asks who she is, but as she tells her tragic story, her terrible luck hits a new, frankly sickening low. Her rescuer becomes her next attacker. The benevolent hero instantly shifts into a wicked-minded wretch. It highlights a really dark truth. The human threat in the woods is just as dangerous, if not more so, than the literal monsters. To understand how this pivot happens so fast, we just have to look at how the text describes her. Clad in half a garment, with faultless limbs, a face resembling a full moon, and speech sweet as honey. The source tells us the hunter becomes afflicted by the god of love.
So, in this incredibly tragic moment, her own unparalleled beauty essentially becomes her next devastating curse. So we're left staring at a pretty desperate question. Stripped of her kingdom, abandoned by her husband, completely exhausted from a snake attack, and possessing absolutely no physical strength or weapons, Damayanti is cornered. The wicked-minded hunter is attempting to use physical force upon her. How can she possibly survive this?
That takes us to Section 5, the power of devotion.
And here's where we hit our fiery, supernatural climax. We are about to witness her transformation from a weeping, helpless victim into a blazing force of nature. The second she understands his dark intentions, Damayanti draws a hard line in the sand. She is described as unconquerable as a flame of blazing fire. She is no longer shrinking in terror, that's for sure.
So how exactly does she fight back? Well, she doesn't use a sword. She uses her character. She draws upon the literal, magical power of her absolute fidelity. Because she hasn't even thought of another man besides Naishadha, her purity acts as a loaded weapon. In her hour of supreme, overwhelming grief, she levels this completely lethal curse directly at her attacker. The effect? It's immediate and it is devastating. The hunter falls lifeless upon the ground, like a tree consumed by fire. She instantly drops an armed, dangerous man dead in his tracks without ever lifting a single physical weapon. Her unwavering devotion was the only shield and the only sword she needed. As we wrap up this explainer, we are really left to marvel at the mechanics of this ancient worldview. It totally challenges us to rethink our definitions of power. If absolute singular devotion can act as a literal, destructive force capable of striking a predator dead on the spot, how should we view the true strength of loyalty today? Is it merely a quiet personal virtue, or is it, as this tale so vividly suggests, an unconquerable elemental force of nature? Think about that as you reflect on Damayanti's incredible crucible.